Hi, this is the fifth video in the second module of my foundation course for property investors. And in this video we're going to look at what makes buy-to-let or property investment work. The first point is up-to-date research, and by up-to-date I mean up-to-date. You constantly have to be researching the buy-to-let or property investment market. You can't do research today and then put it in a filing cabinet. You need to be constantly revising and looking at changing market conditions. Plus the right locations and the right neighborhoods for your strategy. And as I said in an earlier video, your strategy is personal to you and it will only work in certain locations and neighborhoods, and those locations and neighborhoods may not work for other strategies. So you need to identify the right locations and neighborhoods where your strategy will work and carry out the relevant research on those locations and neighborhoods. The second point is that you need a yield that is at least 2% higher than the current and long-term interest rate. And the reason why it needs to be higher than the long-term interest rate is that you have costs over and above the interest cost or interest charges on your mortgage or loans. You will have repairs and maintenance to carry out on the property. You will have letting and management, even if you're doing it on a DIY basis. You'll have letting and management costs. You will also have insurance costs, voids, etc. So to make buy-to-let work, to make property investment work, your yield, the rent as a percentage of the value of the property, needs to be at least 2% higher than the current and long-term interest rate. Now, it may only be 2% higher than the current interest rate, and you may expect the long-term interest rate to rise. But in that case, you need to make certain that your yield can increase. In other words, you can increase the rent. Next point is that you need a gain rate that is at least 2% higher than the current and long-term inflation rate. Regardless of whether you're going for yield or gain, whether the emphasis is on yield and rent, you will still need to see your property increasing in value. There is no point in ignoring that income stream. And therefore you want to pay attention to the gain rate and make certain that it is at least 2% higher than the current and long-term inflation rate. Now we hope to live in a low inflation economy, so you don't need to have a very high gain rate for the gain aspect of your investment to show a return. Combining these two returns, the yield and the gain rate, gives you a 23.5% cash-on-cash return at 75% loan-to-value, or LTV. And by cash-on-cash, I mean you've invested so much cash in the project, and it's the return you get on that cash. So if you, for instance, buy a property for £100,000 and you invest £25,000 as a deposit and £2,000 for your buy costs, your acquisition and setup costs, so you've got an investment of £27,000 altogether, then by combining these two returns, it will give you a 23.5% return on that £27,000 cash that you have invested. You also need a capital gain margin that is 25% higher than the base cost on sale date. So when you decide to sell the property, you need to be able to see a 25% margin on the base cost. And the base cost is the cost of the property and cost of buying the property and also setting it up. We'll come to this point in a later video, or I will repeat the point in a later video. But you need to be able to compare buy-to-let and property investment with any other asset class. Now, if you take stocks and shares, for example, or classic cars as another example, you don't have the expensive acquisition or costs that are involved in buy-to-let. And therefore you need to add to the cost of the property the cost of buying the property and any fix-up work, any setup costs that you have to carry out, the redecoration, the new carpet, things that don't add value to the property. And you need a capital gain margin, as I said, that is 25% higher than those combined costs on sale date. The next point is on flipping. If you're adopting a flipping strategy, then you need a flip profit margin at least 20% higher than the base cost, including interest. Now, the base cost, once again, is the cost of buying the property and also fixing the property up. This time you add interest in, because in the case of the capital gain margin, the interest is recovered against the rental income. But if you're buying a property and immediately flipping it, you don't have a rental income which you can set the interest against. So with a flipping policy or a flipping strategy, you need to include interest in the base cost. You also need to be buying properties at 20 to 30% below true market value. And by true market value, I literally mean that. If a property costs, let's say, £100,000, then you need to be looking at trying to buy it or buying it at between £80,000 and £70,000. And this market value needs to be confirmed. You need to be certain that the true market value is £100,000 and not 90 or 80. Now, the reason for the 20 to 30% margin is that at 75% loan to value, if you're able to buy a property 25% below market value, below true market value, then you will be able to get all your cash out of the property. And at 30% below market value, you would be able to get more than your cash out. In other words, you would be able to remortgage the property and have some cash out of the property to add to your cash pot for investment purposes. This was very easy when pre-credit crunch time we were able to mortgage properties at 85% loan to value. Then we only needed to buy properties at 15 to 20% below true market value to be able to get all our cash out. You also need a short and long term, and by long term I mean 10-year demand for your properties from tenants if you're adopting a buy-to-let strategy. Over a 10-year period, then everything is stabilized and you will see the highest profits. But you don't want to be finding yourself 2, 3, 5 years down the road having to sell the property because your tenants have disappeared or have reduced substantially. So you need to take a long-term view as well as a short-term, and in a long-term view I would suggest at least 10 years. You also need a short and long-term demand for your properties from first-time buyers, because these will be the people who will buy the property from you when you want to sell. And therefore you need to have a stable demand in the location and neighborhood for your properties from first-time buyers, who are the start of the buying pyramid. And finally, you need to have armchair investors, people who are cash rich and time poor, who are willing to pay for your knowledge and expertise. And if you can demonstrate that you know about the location that you're investing in and the neighborhoods, and demonstrate that you're making successful investments, there are many armchair investors who will be more than willing to pay you for your knowledge and expertise and pay you to source properties on their behalf. Remember that buy-to-let in the UK is not only open to buy-to-let residents or to residents in the UK, it has international appeal. And people sitting in South Africa or Hong Kong or Australia or a variety of other countries, many other countries, are prepared to pay you to go and find them properties in your home location, in your investment location, provided you can demonstrate that you know what you're talking about. Okay, that brings me to the end of this video. It's the end of module number 2 of 17, by the way, as well. In module 3, we will look at the potential return from your investments, the blueprints, which are where you can test out financial aspects of investing in property and buy-to-let. We will look at the question as to whether you buy with cash or with a loan. And finally, we will look at whether you invest for income which is rent or yield, capital gains, or both. I thank you for watching and listening, and look forward to seeing you at the start of Module 3. Thank you.